Well, hello there! In today's video we'll be talking about routing in Remix. I'll go over everything you need to know to start working with Remix routing, so without further ado, let's just jump into it. Let's go over the basics first. So the basics of routing all start with the root tsx file. So the root tsx file is a special file located in your app directory, and it's basically the entry point of your whole application. So everything starts here and ends here. So you can think of it as the ring from the Lord of the Rings. So it's kind of like one route to rule them all, one route to find them, and one route to bring them all and in Remix bind them. So as I've already said, the root tsx is located usually in your app directory under the root tsx file, and it usually contains your HTML document, your head, your body, your scripts and stuff like that. And this is the best place to inject scripts, styling and stuff like that. And from there you have three main categories I'll go over. But before we do that, there are some things that we need to know. So the first two things are that dots in file names are slashes in the URL, and you use outlets from Remix.run /react to allow you to do nested routes. We will go over this later on, but that's important to keep in mind as we go over through the whole basic routing and how it works. So the first kind of routes are index routes. So these index routes are basically like leaf nodes, and how they work is they're located in the routes directory in the app, and they usually start with an underscore and their name is index, and they usually have an extension of either tsx or jsx, but this doesn't really matter because the only part that matters is the URL. And the URL is going to be whatever the parent is, or rather what the parent's URL is. So for example, if our parent is root and we have an index file, the URL is just going to be slash, so the home page. And if we, for example, if the parent URL was dashboard and we had dashboard.index.tsx file, the URL here would be dashboard. And that's all you need to know about index routes. The next kind of routes are wildcard routes, and as the name suggests, these kind of routes are wildcards that take any kind of parameter. You'll also find them in the app/routes directory, obviously, because that's the directory that all your routes are located in. You can use some other packages here to change this and not have them in the routes, but the default in Remix is that they're all in routes, so that's something to keep in mind. But nothing stopping you from either writing your own routing system or using a custom one that allows you to have routes outside of the routes directory. The wildcard routes start with a $, and then they're followed by the name of the parameter. So for example, if we have $city, we can enter any URL that starts with any string, and the city is going to be that string. So for example, if we go to Washington, our parameter for the city here is going to be Washington here, and all the other city names are going to also match this route. So for example, if this was New York, this would match the city route. If this was something else, it would still match the city route. And that's the main part about the wildcard routes. And the last kind of routes that I think belong in the basic routing are normal routes. So these are also located in the same directory, obviously, and they're usually a name of a route. So for example, if you have the about page, they are about.tsx, and then these match the URL. So if this was dashboard, the URL would be /dashboard. If this was me, the URL would be me, and so on and so forth. And these are like the main kind of routes you'll be using in 90% of the cases. And there are some niche kind of routes, but I just first wanted to cover these. Now that we understand these kinds of routes, I want to show you how you can use index routes and what are some good cases where you want to use index routes and what are some cases where you want to use normal routes. So let's now move on to a more specific example, and I'll show you how to use index routes effectively. So I've prepared this example to show you when you can use index routes and when you can use normal routes and what the difference is. At first glance, they seem to be identical, and in fact they are. You can use them interchangeably and there's literally no difference, but no difference with a catch. So let's see what the catch is right now. So let's imagine we have two routes. The first route will be the dashboard, so it's located in the routes directory, it's in the dashboard tsx file, and the route is the dashboard. And let's say we have another route. Let's say it's called about, and it's not located in the dashboard, it's its own normal route. It's also located in your app routes directory, it's the about tsx file, and the URL is about. And now let's imagine that this is a normal route here. You use this route to show some dashboard to the user and show some info. And let's say later on your requirements change and now you have the dashboard route, but there are also some sub routes under the dashboard that you also have to show. So for example, let's say you have another route called users and you want the URL to be dashboard/users. Well, in this case, you're not gonna use the dashboard tsx file anymore. What you're gonna do is you're gonna branch out and create a users tsx file. And how is this gonna work is you're going to create a dashboard.users.tsx file, and inside of it locate all the code related to the users. And because it's in dashboard.users.tsx and you've added the outlet to your dashboard here, so that's the important part. Your route that renders all of these children has to have an outlet in order for it to work. And then you create another one called index.tsx, and it's called dashboard.index.tsx, and the route is dashboard because this is an index route. So as you can see, if we go back here, this is identical to having a dashboard tsx and then an index file, but the difference is now that we have an outlet inside of here, we can branch out and create child routes and still have the dashboard segment of the URL show us some information with the index route. So these are the differences between normal and index routes. You can use index routes in cases where you want to create nested children in the URL, but you don't want to not use the dashboard here, but you want to also have it as a URL that shows some UI or whatever. You can use the index route as a method to create child routes that are next to it and even go further. So if you wanted, you could even create an outlet in users tsx and then branch out from there as well. And now that we know that, let's move on to another segment that's really important, and that is layout routes. So these are interesting. So what they are is basically routes that don't have a URL segment. And let's take a look with a practical example. So let's imagine you're building an authentication flow, and in that flow you have a login and a register page. They share the same layout, but you don't want them to have a prefix URL, but rather you want them to have nothing before them, so no prefix. And how you can do that is by creating a layout route. So what layout routes are? They are special kind of routes that start with an underscore, so underscore auth in this example. They do not add anything to the URL, and they're a great way to add layouts or shared logic. And these routes don't even have to be layout routes per se. What you can do with them is something like a shared info hub, where you could have a route like underscore info and then have that info fetch some data for you, and then have use route loader data hook and then get the data from that layout route and use it across your project. And this is the cool and powerful thing about layout routes. They don't just have to be a layout, they can be something that shares logic between their child routes. And how this works is, as you can see, it has no URL. It's underscore auth tsx, and obviously it also has an outlet. So as we've figured out by now, if you want to have child routes, the parent has to have the outlet. And we branch from there. We first create the register tsx by creating underscore auth dot register. And as we said, the underscore auth adds nothing to the URL. So we end up with the register URL here with no prefix. So this means wherever the user lands, it's going to be your site name / register. And then we have the login tsx, which works identically. You have underscore auth here, dot login, you can see the dot here, and then the URL ends up being /login. And that's the powerful way to use layout routes. So now that we understand what layout routes are, let's go over a different kind of subtype that's also important to understand. Optional segments. So what these are a special kind of routes that allow you to add a wildcard to the URL, but you can omit it. So what this means is you can add URL segments that can be excluded from the URL, but the routes will still work. If we have something like this, where we have a lang.index file, so this is the file location in routes, you can add an optional language here and it will match the route properly. So you can either be /nothing or /some language, for example English. And with normal routes it works the identical way. So for example, you have lang.about instead of .index, and how it works is it either matches about or /English /about. And that's the cool thing about optional segments. It allows you to add segments to your URL without actually having to require that parameter. So you can either omit it and use a default one, or the user can specify it, or you can specify it in some way, and then it uses that specified one. And that allows you to have some flexibility with your URLs and do some cool tricks, like using it for languages or maybe something else like subdomains, something like that. It really depends on you, and you can use it for a lot of stuff, so it's really up to you. And that's pretty much it about the optional segments. Pretty powerful, up to you if you need them, but something really important to know. So now let's move on to the next section, Splat routes. So these are really nice. What they allow you to do is basically catch all the routes that are not covered and show something for it. So what this means is they match everything after the prefix, so whatever the prefix to the route is, and they're great for 404 pages or something like that, or even 500, really depends on you. And what you can do with these is basically create routes by adding a $sign followed by nothing and then the file extension. So what this means is, if for example you want your dashboard route to have a catch route that allows the user to go to the 404 page on the dashboard whenever he goes to a route that doesn't exist, you just do dashboard dot $sign dot tsx, and this will catch all the dashboard / routes that do not exist. And that's the most important part. These catch all the routes that do not exist yet. If you have dashboard / something, it will not go into the Splat route, it will go into that route. If you wanted to add this to your whole application as a 404 page, what you can do is add a $.tsx, and this will basically match anything that doesn't exist. So for example, in this case, because we only have the dashboard here, it would match /route or /something or /nested /route. It matches everything, even if it's nested. So that's the cool thing about Splat routes. These are great for 404 pages and matching unexisting routes. and you can even use them for some other use cases, but these are the most common ones. Let's talk about escape routes. Well, these are not really called escape routes, I just call them escape routes, but what they are is special kind of routes that allow you to basically escape the layout that the parent had. So the important thing to know about these routes is that their prefix ends with an underscore. And these are great to eject the routes out of the parent's layout and let them use something else. So for example, if we have a dashboard route here, and then it ends with the dashboard TSX and the URL is dashboard, what we can do is we can say, let's create a new route, and we're gonna call it dashboard underscore dot not shared, and the URL is going to be dashboard slash not shared, and this will not use the layout of the dashboard, but it will rather use the next layout that's available. So in our case, because the root is the next layout, it's going to inherit the layout from root, and because maybe our root is not styled, it will inherit this. So when's a great opportunity to use this? Well, the best places I've found in my experience to use these are, for example, when you want to print files. So you want to show the user a PDF, or you maybe want to give them an invoice or something like that, or along those lines. Then you use these escape hatches. You go to the root that doesn't have almost any styling, and then just show a new layout. And that's it for escape routes. Alright, so the final thing I want to show you, and you might have noticed through this tutorial, I've been using the directory and the file and the URL, and you might have wondered, why the heck is this guy using folders when all of the routes go into the routes folder? Well, I'm not crazy, and this is why. You can actually use folders as well to co-locate your files. These are done through special kind of folders that you use in your routes folder. So if you're one of those crazy kids that like to test stuff, this is the perfect way to organize your tests with your routes. So for example, if you have the dashboard and then you create a dashboard folder, it's going to have the dashboard URL, and then there's a special reserved name for a file inside of it called route.tsx. And when you add a route.tsx file inside of the app/route/dashboard folder, you're going to create the dashboard route, and whatever is located inside of this folder is not going to be a route except the route.tsx. So what this means is, if we have route.test.tsx inside of the dashboard folder here, it's not going to be a route. Only the route.tsx is going to be a route. And something to keep in mind here, if you want to use folders for better organization, and if you want to have multiple routes per folder and have nested folder routes, you can look into Remix Flat Routes. That's a really popular package, and it allows you to have also nested folders, but Remix v2 only allows for one layer of nesting. So that means you can't have a dashboard folder and then another folder inside of it with the route.tsx, because that won't work. Only one level of nesting is allowed. So that's something to keep in mind here. And the final thing that we need to go over, that's maybe rarely used but could be of use, is a special kind of route that allows you to do some really cool tricks with it. So let's go over that as well. Escaped routes. So these routes are basically what allows you to show some special escaped characters in the URL. So for example, let's say you have a RSS feed or XML files or PDF files or whatever. You can use these escaped routes to render them in the URL. So for example, we can use a special kind of syntax using brackets and then writing inside of brackets what we want to be in the URL, and then add the file extension. So if you look at this example here, we use sitemap XML inside of the brackets, and that results in the sitemap XML URL. And this allows us to show an XML file on the URL that we specify. And these are special kind of routes as well, and they're usually rarely used, but they can come in handy if you need to do some kind of custom stuff or show some files or something like that. And that's pretty much it for routing. Now you know how routing works in Remix, and you're ready to start working on your first Remix project. And that's it for today. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a comment if you have any questions or opinions on what video I should do next. See you in the next one. Bye!